All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Workman and happy Friday. We're here with the ResinSmart powered by RTI team and got my colleague here, Brian Balboa, to talk about where the resin markets are currently, especially since, we're here entering the summer months, as if you couldn't tell by our festive shirts and our
Yeah.
sunglasses here. Really like yours, Brian.
Yeah, well, I have a million of these shirts in my closet, so it's time to break them out, Mike. That's summertime. Hey, it's pretty much a good time to really just reflect on what the first half of the year has been like when it comes to the resin and packaging side of things. So, I like to think that, we're ready for the summertime because you have a lot of, just peak seasonal demand that should be coming around. When you look at summer driving, you look at summer bottle season, you're looking at summer packaging season, and of course, the big one is summer hurricane season, which, is really going to be a major factor for the next, 4 to 5 months here. So yeah, we're ready here at
Yeah,
RTF.
absolutely. I looking forward to your weather reports here as the summer goes on. I certainly hope that you and your family and everybody else in the Houston area avoids a massive hurricane, but that's a reality this time of the year for sure. Well, I really like kind of how you put that, Brian. I mean, it's certainly been a action-packed first half of the year, to say the very least, with all of the trade dynamics. I think to kick us off, I mean, we're approaching summer here. What's your take on kind of how the resin markets have been performing? I know you hit on a couple of things that we need to think about, but we're kind of starting off on a weaker note. Are we not, given all the uncertainty we've been dealing with?
Pretty much. So it's interesting you say an action-packed year because yes, it has been an action-packed year in terms of, just geopolitical developments, obviously with a lot of global trade developments in terms of tariffs, uncertainty. But when you look at what's actually going on with the markets when it comes to resin, it's been pretty lackluster is my favorite word to use because we're looking at, your major resin markets like polyethylene, polypropylene. Well, it's been lackluster, for lack of a better word, because we're still pretty much swimming in resin when it comes to polyethylene and polypropylene. You look at what's going on with, polyethylene right now, year on year, we're still up just over 1 billion pounds compared to last year. So, of course, that's a leading indication that supply positions are going to be very strong heading into the third quarter, heading into the summer. Of course, you have the recent tariff developments, which is still going to be a factor regardless of that. When we look at what's going on with polypropylene, well, the big driver of that market has always been the feedstock PGP monomer market. And that market is starting to really stabilize because we're looking at a rollover for May, and it's really going to be hard for producers to try and implement any increase for the summer. Now, what we typically see during the summer months is we see a lot of producers that try and kind of piggyback off of the hurricane scare, so to speak. But it's been like that really for the past 3 years where you have a lot of producers that are trying to piggyback off of what we see with hurricane forecasts only for them to be really left holding the bag, so to speak, with a lot of inventory out there, which is again why I mentioned where we are in polyethylene, specifically up just over 1 billion pounds year over year. Now, when we look at, the polypropylene market, yeah, we're up pretty much year over year as well with 21.3 million pound draw. Initially, that was reported for May, but now we're looking at a nearly 43 million uh, pound draw for April polypropylene inventory. Year on year, though, we're still up nearly 40 million pounds for polypropylene. So again, very strong supply positions heading into the summer months. When it comes to demand, though, look at all of these downstream segments. Demand has just been really slow. The big reason being inflation, recessionary concerns that have been weighing on this market. Now, typically when we get into the summertime, we do see a bit of a uptick in demand. Again, it's just been really slow, and it's going to be really difficult for the next few months to see what's going on with this demand here. It's not really a pretty picture, so to speak, in terms of overall supply demand fundamentals, but nonetheless, we do expect a bit of an uptick for the next few months. Not much of one, but we do expect a bit of an uptick in terms of your seasonal demand.
Yeah, I mean, wow, Brian, a lot to unpack there. I want to definitely, circle back to the polyethylene conversation. I mean, 1 billion pounds, it's just such a big number
Yeah.
to be, up year over year. And, we've all seen those price increase nominations coming out for, for May, and I'm sure we'll see some for June. But, definitely we've been, certainly have a lot of conversations with our clients on, if you need material, it can be out there, push back, against those increases. And, the other thing I wanted to kind of mention, you mentioned some of those markets. I was looking at some of the construction numbers from the last couple months, and because those affect markets like PVC, of course, and certainly the polyolefins to some extent. But man, those numbers were really tracking much lower from a year-over-year standpoint than normal. So, I mean, even if we do see a spike, do you think it's going to be enough to help a lot of these guys catch up, or what's your thought on that?
Well, thoughts on that? We look at mortgage rates, obviously, and how that's going to impact, this demand and new buyers because, yeah, you know, builders really don't want to be left, with a lot of inventory, just like any other producer out there, just like any other, manufacturer. You don't want to be left with a lot of inventory. So inventory of unsold homes is another factor. So really, we're looking at what's going on with that. We look at a lot of other factors and how that could correlate to what's going on with housing, not just PVC, obviously, but the coatings market is a big thing. A lot of just paints, a lot of what's going on with those markets. We're looking at what's going on with sales of sinks, faucets, toilets,
Right.
all of that. All of that will factor into what's going to happen with the housing markets. It's been a pretty slow go of it, but hey, like I said, I mean, we are in the peak summer season and we're in the summer moving season as well. This is when a lot of home buyers are looking at the market. They're looking to either buy and sell because you're on vacation pretty much, and a lot of kids are out of school. So this
Yep.
is the best time, and it's a really strong indication of what's going to happen with housing and construction, at least for the next few months here.
Well, yeah, and then I mean, to your point there, Brian. I mean, I'm sure you're going to be off on the road with the kids and the car, right? Quite a bit. I know I'm going to be doing a lot of daddy Ubering, is what we call it in the workman household. It certainly uses a lot of fuel, driving season, right? Which is a huge part of, kind of the feedstocks that we care about, and plastics, of course, get affected by that. And then bottle season, right? I mean,
Right.
bottles of water tend to go into the PET side. So you bring up a lot of really good points. I guess I'm just a little nervous on, is the demand bounce back going to be enough to overcome some of the weakness that we've seen here to start the year? Or maybe I'm more
Right,
of a
right.
pessimist by
Yeah, so
nature or a realist. I don't know how you want to think about that.
when it comes to food packaging, whether it's bottles, or whether it's you know, those coffee pods, even, whether it's just clamshells for takeout or anything like that. Yeah, that's always been pretty consistent. And again, summer is always kind of a big boom for that when it comes to the food packaging side of things. Now, what happens after the summertime? That's where you really have to kind of dig down and get a deeper dive, which is why we have our 30-day, 60-day, 90-day
Yeah.
outlooks at RTI here on the ResinSmart side of things. So that's what I would definitely recommend to anybody just watching this video here, anyone watching this discussion on the peak summer season here when it comes to certain demand sectors.
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. Yeah, definitely stay plugged in with us on the forward-looking forecast. I mean, it's why folks have been partnering with us for over 26 years now. I think I got that right, back in 1998. But I think we need to segue to the elephant in the room. I was reading the NOAA forecasts for what's coming with weather and hurricanes, and we're starting to talk about things like Sahara dusts and
Yeah, yeah.
things like that, right? With clients, my main takeaway was it's going to be more of an active year, which ups the risk that something could hit your neck of the woods, which is where a lot of the petrochemical feedstocks are. What are you hearing down there, Brian? I mean, what is your what are you hearing in terms of the weather, and what are you telling clients to do about it?
Well, I mean, we always want our clients to be prepared going in. I mean, it's the old, Boy Scout motto when you're going into an active forecast for hurricane season. But again, we've seen this for the past few years now, where it's just really just a cautionary outlook. I mean, if you're in the resin market, whether you're a buyer or seller, you always have to factor in for hurricane season regardless. It's always going to be an issue. So that's mainly what we're telling our clients. That's mainly what we're hearing as well when it comes to the market outlook. It's just making sure your supply positions are ready to go, making sure your logistics are ready to go as well. And it's not just having that set up, but looking at alternatives if you need that, whether it's rail car distribution, whether it's a
Right.
truck distribution. It's always a motto of be prepared heading into this heavy summer season. And typically your processors, typically your producers are always going to have these contingency plans in place anyways. It's standard, really. So, we're already seeing the first kind of development off the Pacific, but that's the Pacific. Really, we're more worried about the Gulf Coast more than anything. Again, which is where a lot of production is going to be concentrated along. Last year, we had a Hurricane Beryl that was really, you know, short-lived. It had very little minimal impact on production here. But the thing is, I mean, that was about a mile from my house here. I just
Oh,
missed
geez.
it. That's, yeah, you hate to say it, that's always good for construction, when it comes to renovation, repair. Hopefully we don't see something like that, because we did see that, more in the eastern part of the U.S. last year, specifically, looking at the southeast, whether it was Florida, the Carolinas, Kentucky, that got hit really, really bad with some severe weather down there. So, it's not just hurricanes. We also have to worry about a lot of tornadoes here, which is, technically we're in Hurricane Alley, which is
Right.
going down the Midwest down to Texas here. So that's always going to be an issue regardless of hurricane season.
Yeah, as someone here in the North Dallas area that deals with tornadoes and has a new roof pending because of all the severe damage that we've gotten for the past several years, your comment around construction, is a reality, right? Might depending on how the season goes. I mean, you might see some increase in certain markets as a result of that. Let's hope not, because that means we've had some severe weather, but it's a reality. And to your point, I mean, if you need some help in terms of charting out your contingency planning, right, supply chain, other vendors, qualifications, these are all things that we get into quite extensively and in a level of detail with our clients.
Especially
So,
now, especially
right.
now, we're always, you know, uh, getting calls just ahead of, a hurricane season. And it's not just hurricane season, it's also, the new thing is, ever since we had the Texas freeze, Erie back in 21, I believe it was, that's always been an issue since then now. So we also have to worry about the Texas freeze. Once we get out of hurricane season, we have maybe a couple months of fall, and then we're getting into, the winter, which is, you know, an added factor now that we really didn't have to talk about
Yeah.
in the past.
No, you're spot on with that. Well, let's take one weather event at a time. From the latest forecast that we were looking at, I mentioned Sahara dust to begin with. It sounds, or it looks like that is mitigating a lot of the activity off of the African coast, which is where the Gulf Coast storms typically start. So
Yeah.
I think for everything that I've seen, we're in good shape on this side of the Atlantic, at least for the foreseeable next few days into next week.
Right.
So fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Good stuff, man. We've covered a lot today. I think, just looking forward, what are there anything additional, anything else out there that the resin purchasers should be, considering? Of course, we haven't dove too deep into the trade dynamics, somewhat by design, as we are in a little bit of a holding pattern still on each of the individual deals that come out. I think what we do know is the 10% reciprocal baseline seems to be pretty consistent. But anything else, Brian, that we should be thinking about?
You hit it on the head, really. Just these trade dynamics are really what's keeping the market really on its toes, and it's getting to a point where this market is getting fatigued by all of these you know trade developments that are going on, because it's here today, gone tomorrow, pretty much.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to say it, man. And listen, I appreciate your insights as always. Summer months are Definitely time for family and friends, but they're, certainly an active time in our industry, and it's important to have folks and partners that are out, monitoring the market for you, and that's where the ResinSmart team comes into play. If you found this helpful, be sure to tune in to our content on YouTube or whatever channel that you get these podcasts. So until next time,